In the world of private flying, one airplane was built to be better than everything else. This is the Beechcraft Duke, the royal tragedy of general aviation. Back in the 1960s, if you were a millionaire with a big ego, this was the only seat you wanted. It looked like a private jet, but it used massive, thirsty engines to punch through the clouds in total luxury. It was a masterpiece of style, but behind that beautiful face was a secret that would eventually bankrupt its owners and turn a royal dream into a mechanical nightmare. Engineers pushed the limits of what was possible, creating a machine so complex that even the smartest mechanics started to fear it. Now these flying mansions sit in dusty hangars, rotting away because the cost of keeping them in the air is simply impossible for a human to pay. Why did the most beautiful twin-engine plane ever made become a trap for the wealthy? And is the Duke a masterpiece of engineering, or was it just a very expensive mistake? On a sunlit ramp in 1968, the Beechcraft Duke made its entrance like royalty arriving at court. The polished aluminum gleamed, the nose pointed skyward, and the doors swung open to reveal a world reserved for executives and oil barons. This was not just an airplane, it was a throne built for the era's self-made kings. Brochures called it the mini airliner, promising jet-age comfort at a piston price. The Duke's silhouette, with its tall fin and swept lines, was pure theater, engineered to turn heads and spark envy, not just to fly. Beechcraft's advertising teams understood the power of aspiration. Magazine spreads showed the Duke parked outside glass-walled terminals, a tailored suit descending the air stair, briefcase in hand, ready to conquer the boardroom. Taglines whispered promises: jet-style comfort for the corporate traveler, pressurized prestige without the jet price. The target was clear: men aged 35 to 50, division heads and rising stars. Men who measured their worth not just in dollars, but in altitude and airspeed. Inside, the cabin was trimmed in leather and walnut veneer. Soundproofing muffled the outside world, turning the 6-seat interior into a flying boardroom. Every detail signaled status: the gold Beechcraft crest on the yoke, the glint of chrome on the throttle quadrant, the pressurization gauge set like a crown jewel in the panel. This was the royal court of general aviation, and to own a Duke was to announce you had arrived. The Duke's ramp presence was undeniable. Parked beside a baron or a piper, it looked like a private jet that had slipped in from another world. Dealers called it the Ferrari with a heart condition, alluring, temperamental, and built for those who believed they could tame anything with enough money and willpower. The price tag, just under $100,000 in 1968, was a small fortune. But for the right buyer, it was the cost of admission to an elite club. In the golden hour of American aviation, the Duke was a symbol of ambition, a machine designed to flatter the ego and satisfy the hunger for status. But every crown carries a weight, and beneath the surface, the Duke's beauty concealed a complexity that would test even the most devoted owner. For now, though, the dream was alive, and the Duke reigned supreme on the ramp, its promise shimmering in the morning light. The price of admission to the royal court was set at $98,000 in 1968, an audacious figure for a piston twin, even in the flush years of the Johnson economy. That number, stamped on dealer invoices and whispered in executive suites, was more than a price tag. It was a velvet rope, separating the Duke from the working-class barons and Senecas lined up on the same ramp. For that sum, nearly $850,000 in today's dollars, a buyer was not just purchasing an aircraft. He was buying the illusion of jet-age power, a pressurized sanctuary at 24,000 feet, and a seat among the corporate aristocracy. Beechcraft's own forecasts brimmed with optimism. The boardroom strategists, armed with market studies and a head full of ambition, projected 500 units sold by the early 1970s. The calculus was simple: if even a fraction of baron owners decided to step up, and if enough oilmen and regional bankers wanted to outshine their rivals, the Duke would pay back its $7 million development bill and then some. The Wichita assembly line was tooled up to match these dreams, ready to deliver 150 Dukes in the launch year alone. But the numbers never lived up to the fantasy. In reality, Only 444 Dukes ever left the line between 1968 and 1983. That shortfall was more than a missed target. It was the first sign that exclusivity, when engineered into every rivet and every system, comes with a price that even the wealthy hesitate to pay twice. Each Duke that rolled out was a technical marvel, but every one of those 444 serial numbers represented a gamble that prestige could outweigh practicality, that a mini airliner could thrive in a world built for workhorses, not thoroughbreds. The production tally became its own kind of badge. Dealers told buyers they were joining an elite club, rarer than the King Air set, more exclusive than the Baron crowd. But behind the curtain, Beechcraft's accountants watched the costs climb. Specialized parts, custom pressure vessels, maintenance training for systems no other piston twin required. The Duke's exclusivity was not just a marketing slogan, it was a built-in scarcity, enforced by the very complexity that made the aircraft so alluring on the ramp. For owners, that scarcity would soon turn from a point of pride into a financial snare. The same engineering that made the Duke the envy of the tarmac would demand a loyalty measured not just in dollars, but in patience and persistence. The royal court was never meant for the faint of heart or the thin of wallet. The numbers, once a symbol of status, foreshadowed a reckoning that would haunt the Duke's legacy for decades to come. Step inside the Duke's polished skin and you find a pressure vessel built less like a piston twin and more like a bank vault. The fuselage is wrapped in 0.025-inch 2024 T3 aluminum, reinforced by frames spaced every 12 inches, closer than in most contemporaries. This dense lattice was the price of an £8 per square inch differential, a figure that let the Royal Court cruise at 25,000 feet while keeping the cabin below 5,000 feet. But every ounce of strength here is paid back in complexity and labor. The pressurization system is a maze of bleed airlines, heat exchangers, and pressure regulators, all designed to squeeze every bit of comfort from the Lycoming engines. Air is tapped off the turbochargers, cooled, and piped through a manifold to a pair of outflow valves, pneumatic and spring-loaded, and notorious for their appetite for attention. Those outflow valve seals made of reinforced nitrile are the first domino in a cascade of maintenance. They harden and crack in the heat, demanding inspection every 200 hours. Skip a check, and the next flight could turn into a lesson in rapid decompression. Pressure doors and windows are ringed by large area seals that look robust on paper, but wear down with every cycle. Each cutout in the skin, every window, every service panel is a potential stress riser, a place where fatigue can start its slow, invisible work. The oval cross-section that gives the Duke its jet-like stance also means more non-uniform hoop stress, so Beechcraft doubled up on doublers, adding more metal and more joints. That is more places for corrosion to hide, especially under the fairings and at the lower radius of the door frames. Annual inspections require a flashlight, a borescope, and a willingness to remove most of the interior just to check the inner skin for corrosion or fatigue. A simple outflow valve seal swap, listed as a 3-hour job in the manual, can stretch to 2 days if a mechanic finds a hard spot or a hint of corrosion at the frame joint. The FAA mandates a full leak test of the pressure bulkheads every year, which means pressurizing the cabin on the ground and hunting for the faint hiss of escaping air, sometimes through a panel barely wide enough for a gloved hand. Compared to the Baron, where a mechanic can see most of the structure with a quick glance and a mirror, the Duke is a fortress. Every layer of engineering meant to protect the royal court has become a barrier to those tasked with keeping it aloft. The same structural density that makes the Duke a marvel in the air turns every service into an ordeal. The pressure vessel is both crown and shackle, a monument to ambition, but a trial for anyone who dares to maintain it. Beneath the Duke's polished cowlings, the Lycoming TIO 541 sits like a masterpiece with a flaw at its core. Each engine is rated for 380 horsepower and 450 horsepower in later models. It delivers the kind of turbocharged, fuel-injected thrust that once promised to lift pilots above the clouds and into the realm of royalty. The numbers on the spec sheet evoke prestige, high cruise, pressurization to 24,000 feet, the illusion of invincibility. Yet every mechanic who has wrestled with this engine knows the truth behind the legend. The TIO 541 is a Ferrari with a heart condition. Its turbo system, a maze of high-temperature alloys and tightly packed plumbing, feeds the Duke's pressurized cabin but demands constant vigilance. Turbocharger bearings run at the edge of their limits, exhaust manifolds are prone to cracking, and oil lines snake through the airframe, waiting for heat or vibration to expose their weakness. FAA Airworthiness Directive 92-12-05 mandates regular inspections of exhaust. Manifold flanges and piston pins for micro cracks, an order born from too many failures and forced landings. A missed crack can end a flight in disaster. Hot starts are the Duke's crucible. When the engine is warm, vapor lock and fuel boil off turn every restart into a gamble. Stories circulate of engines that refuse to catch, or worse, roar to life with a surge that sends oil temperatures soaring and turbo blades howling. One wrong move on the throttle, and the price is more than embarrassment, it is the risk of catastrophic turbo failure. Lycoming's Service Instruction 1009BE sets the time between overhauls at 1,600 hours, but few engines reach that mark without trouble. The overhaul is a marathon. 250 labor hours, every accessory and turbo component tagged, every bearing checked for heat scars. The process drags on for weeks, with the real pace set by parts supply and the owner's patience. Every overhaul is an investigation: cracked manifolds, sticky turbo bypass valves, piston pins on the verge of fracture. Service bulletins read like warnings: inspect, replace, repeat. The Duke's engines offer brilliance at altitude, but fragility on the ground. Each flight is a wager: will the Ferrari heart keep beating, or will the next hot start or cracked flange tip the balance from majesty to heartbreak? The ledger tells no lies. In the royal court, the price of prestige is carved into every invoice and every hour lost to downtime. The average Duke owner faces an annual outlay of $102,000, an amount that would finance 2 barons with change left for fuel and a steak dinner. The breakdown is relentless. Fuel and oil alone swallow tens of thousands, but the real bloodletting starts with the maintenance schedule. Every 200 hours, outflow valve seals demand inspection and likely replacement. 3 hours, according to the manual, or 2 days when corrosion rears its head. Each seal is a custom order, not a shelf item, and the wait for a replacement can stretch from 6 weeks to 3 months. Parts distributors quote 12 months for a turbocharger housing, 6 months for a fuel injector module. The Duke's pressurization system, with its maze of bleed air lines and spring-loaded valves, guarantees that even simple fixes balloon into major projects. Invoices from certified shops read like a forensic autopsy. $4,800 for a pair of outflow valve seals, $12,000 for a turbocharger overhaul, $1,500 for a set of pressure door seals. Labor costs are the silent killer: 250 hours for an engine overhaul, billed at $95 an hour before a single part is replaced. A single annual inspection can mean stripping the interior, borescoping every frame joint, and chasing down the faintest hiss of escaping air. Mechanics charge for every panel removed, every rivet replaced, every hour spent hunting corrosion behind a fairing. Then come the hidden costs. Downtime is measured not in days, but in quarters. An owner grounded by a parts delay loses revenue, faces hangar fees, and still pays insurance on a machine that sits idle. The Duke's exclusivity becomes a curse. Fewer than 40 airframes flying means no economies of scale, no bulk orders, no aftermarket bargains. Each rare part is a bespoke artifact, each repair a boutique ordeal. Numbers explain why so many royal courts now gather dust. For every Duke that gleams on the ramp, 2 more languish in storage, their owners bled dry by the promise of jet-age luxury. The market retreats, not out of lack of desire, but from the cold arithmetic of ownership. In the end, the Duke's ledger is a cautionary tale. ambition measured in red ink, prestige exacted in lost time, and a legacy built on the ruins of financial surrender. Across the American heartland, the royal court now sits in silent rows, wings drooping, paint faded, windows clouded by years of neglect. The once proud Duke, engineered to outshine every rival on the ramp, has become a fixture in storage yards and hangars, its promise of jet-age grandeur reduced to a negotiation between nostalgia and financial reality. More than half of all surviving airframes exist not as flying machines, but as parts donors, cannibalized to keep a shrinking handful airborne. Mechanics walk these boneyards with clipboards and flashlights, searching for salvageable pressure doors, outflow valves, or a turbocharger that has not succumbed to heat and time. Each stripped fuselage tells the same story. The cost of resurrection outweighs the value of the prize. Restoration, once a badge of pride, now demands a calculus that borders on the absurd. The price of a full engine overhaul, pressurization system rebuild, and corrosion abatement can double or triple the resale value of the airplane itself. Owners face a dilemma: pour a fortune into a machine that the market regards as a beautiful liability, or accept the finality of structural surrender, letting the Duke slip quietly into the realm of static displays and museum pieces. Even the most passionate restorers, armed with rare parts and deep pockets, admit that the break-even point is a moving target, one that recedes further with every passing year and every new airworthiness directive. For some, the Duke remains a siren, its ramp presence undiminished by time. A handful of collectors still chase the dream, spending years tracking down obsolete seals or commissioning custom-fabricated turbo components. But for most, the reality is unflinching. The royal court is a relic. Its reign ended not by a single catastrophic failure, but by a slow, relentless erosion of support, parts, and economic sense. The Duke's beauty is undiminished, but its burden is now measured in hours of labor, months of downtime, and a ledger of red ink. The myth endures, but the fleet grows quieter with each season, leaving behind a cautionary tale inscribed in aluminum and ambition. Today, rows of Duke airframes sit silent, monuments to ambition outpacing prudence. In a world still dazzled by luxury and speed, the royal court's fate warns that engineering for ego writes checks that maintenance can't cash. Economic extinction isn't ancient history. It's a living risk every time complexity wins out over common sense. The Ferrari with a heart condition waits as a caution, waiting for the next dreamer to lift the crown. Share your thoughts below.